Your backyard camera has seen something. Having your house broken into is bad on a lot of levels. Even when you aren't home at the time, there's always that thought of what if you had been home? Would they still have come in, and if so, what would you have done? What would they have done? Then there's the inconvenience of the cops and the cleanup, and if they take or damage too much, weeks of dealing with the insurance company too. A bunch of bullshit hassle when all you wanted to do is come home to your life away from the world and find it the way you left it. But the worst part is the sense of wrongness. Of invasion. And it's not just that someone entered space that was supposed to be safe and just for you. It's that it reminds you of the fact that it can happen anywhere, at any time. That no space is truly safe. When I was 23, somebody broke into my apartment. I was pretty broke at the time too, so they didn't get much, but the feeling they left behind stuck. I invested in better locks and doorstop sticks. And when I got my own house, my first big purchase was an alarm system and a set of cameras. Where I live is off the beaten path a little bit. I'm in a neighborhood of sorts, but at the tail end where it looks like the woods behind the development might eat my house and the ones down the street before too long. Someone has to work to find me, in other words, and my little piece of quiet really is full of peace and quiet. And then last week, my phone buzzed. Your backyard camera has seen something. I frowned down at the notification. It wasn't the first time I'd ever seen a similar notification from my phone, but other than me, my sister when she visited, or the occasional delivery person, it was rare. I usually went out to meet friends, the mail was delivered down at the street, and the cameras were all set to not go off at the sight of a passing bug or squirrel. Even rarer was the backyard camera going off. It was fenced in, and it was a rarity that anyone went back there but me. The one time I remember getting a notification from that camera that wasn't me, it had been a fat possum waddling along the top of the back chain-link fence last summer. But this wasn't that. It was a person. Not that I saw them in the footage when I noticed the alert the next morning. No, they kept themselves clearly out of view when lifting the piece of cardboard to the camera. The black marker words printed across the paper swam in and out of focus as the camera adjusted, but I managed to pause it well enough to read them after a couple of tries. We can never meet. So this way. You are not safe. He will come. For you. Get gun. Kill him first. I felt my mouth go dry as I scrubbed the video back and watched it over again. There was no sound, but I could see some flicker of movement as the sign was pulled away again. I had a sense that whoever had held it up had run back to the rear gate and left that way in a hurry. Heart pounding, I went to the back door and looked out. There was no sign of anything misplaced or left behind or... No, wait. The back gate on the fence wasn't latched. It had swung back closed, but not hard enough to latch it. Going out into the yard to pull it closed, I felt the familiar feelings of violation and fear begin crawling up my sides, each hook nail digging into my ribs as they scuttled up and coiled into my brain. What was this? Some kind of prank on neighborhood kids? I felt a flare of anger at the thought, but some relief too. If it could be explained away as stupid kids, at least it wasn't really anything to worry about. That afternoon, I called the police, and when they sent around a cop an hour later, I had the video already downloaded on a USB stick and had written down the timestamps and everything I saw. The officer was nice enough, but I could tell he wasn't overly concerned, and when I threw out the idea of pranking kids, he happily jumped on the idea with an enthusiastic nod. I thanked him for his time and then went around to all the cameras, making sure they were all adjusted to be at the best angles for any future visitors. Then I went inside, locked all the doors, and waited. I was starting to doze just after 2 in the morning when I heard my phone chime and jolted awake. Picking it up, I saw the notification. Your backyard camera has seen something. Blood pounding in my ears, I tapped on the notification as I got off the sofa and headed to the back side of the house. The screen lit up with a live feed of the backyard's camera, and I stopped in the middle of the hallway as I realized what I was seeing. It was a smaller person, probably a woman, running away from the camera toward the backyard fence. Following her was a large man wearing a dark blue or black set of coveralls. He covered the ground quickly with each long stride, and he managed to grab her hair as she started over the fence. I let out a gasp as I watched him ball up his other hand and strike her once, twice, 3 times in the side of the head before letting her fall bonelessly off the other side of the fence. He clambered over after her, and they both sank into the green-gray murk at the edge of the camera's night vision. I called 911 immediately, and to their credit, they were out there quickly looking for any sign of my intruders. They could tell I was legitimately freaked out, and they spent nearly an hour combing the area for any sign of where the man and woman could have gone. Meanwhile, I had rewound the video to before the notification and watched it again to see what I'd missed starting from the middle. Like the first video days earlier, for some time it's just a boring backyard at night. Then, without warning, a piece of cardboard slips into view from below. The writing is worse this time, but I can still read it when I pause the video just right. Gun didn't work. Find another way or run. Do not show them this video or we are lost. The sign is held up for about 10 seconds before a woman comes running into view, being followed by the large man chasing her. It is a woman, I can tell that now. She looks familiar even, though I can't say I've ever. Ma'am? I jumped slightly at the deputy's presence. Shit. You startled me. Sorry, what was it you needed? He smiled. Sorry, ma'am. Well, you mentioned having a video again. Do you still have that? I felt myself hesitate. Why? Why did I want to listen to some strange invader over this guy who seemed nice and willing to help? Yet I already heard myself lying to the deputy, telling him that it didn't back up the video this time. He frowned. Well, that's a shame. It's not that I think it didn't happen. I do. But having proof like that could help us figure out what happened out here and why. I nodded and then gave a start as a thought occurred to me. Did you find a sign? A sign? What kind of sign? I blushed a little, nervous I was going to give away too much. Well, you know, like the first time they held up a sign to the camera, so I wondered if they had something like that, you know, this time. The deputy stared at me a moment before shaking his head. No sign. Glancing back over the yard, he turned back to give me an awkward smile. Sorry I'm not more help, but we will keep looking into this, and we'll be back in touch. And if anything else strange happens, just give us a call, okay? 3 nights later, my camera alerted me again. There was no sign this time. Just a small shape running across the backyard near the fence, barely in view. She was looking behind her, but suddenly the large figure appeared out of the murk in front of her and grabbed her by the neck. Her feet were kicking a foot of the ground, and after a few seconds of struggle, she went limp. The large man dropped her to the grass casually before turning toward me, the camera, and walking close enough for me to see their face. It was the hardened and cruel face of an older man, sloped and jetting forehead over 2 small eyes and a hooked nose that pointed down to a twisted, smirking mouth. A large scar, clearly years old even in the poor clarity of the camera footage, ran like a lightning bolt down from between his eyes to the bottom edge of his cheek. He stared into the camera, mouthing words that I could not hear but that I still felt in my heart. Maybe it was my imagination, but it seemed like I knew what he was saying and that it was meant for me. Be seeing you. I had taken a sleeping pill the night before, and so I didn't see the video until after 9 the next morning. I called 911 yet again, and this time it wasn't the nice deputy from before that came to my door. It was him. 20 years younger and without a scar, but it was that towering man from the videos, staring down at me with what felt like contempt as I gasped for air and pushed the door closed to a crack. He asked to come in and take my statement, but I told him no thank you, I'd changed my mind. Puffing out a long, irritated breath, he finally wished me a nice day and left. I could hardly breathe or think after I pushed the door shut and locked it. It had been him, right? Much younger and unscarred, but I remembered that face. But he hadn't seemed to recognize me, unless he was a really good actor. I thought about calling 911 again, but what could I tell them? I didn't know what to believe or think, and I was even starting to doubt myself the more I tried to make sense of it all. Maybe I just needed to give it some time, try to not think about it, and see if weird things stopped happening or I could figure out some explanation for it all. I spent the rest of the day checking the doors and staring out the windows, and by that night I was a nervous wreck. I was locked in the bedroom with a butcher knife under my pillow. I told myself it was just a precaution to make myself feel better for a night or two, but I didn't know that I believed it. I felt like I was trapped in a room filling with gas, every minute making the pressure grow as it became harder to breathe. I didn't think I'd be able to sleep at all, but at some point exhaustion took over. I woke up to him on top of me. His weight was crushing the air from my lungs, but the fear and adrenaline was keeping my brain razor sharp, at least for a few seconds more. In the moonlight coming through the window, I could see it was the man who'd been at my door leering down at me. One hand over my mouth and nose, the plasticky glint of zip ties were coiled around the fingers of his other hand. He meant to take me, and if I didn't stop him now, we'd be lost. He'd pinned my right arm with his leg, but not my left, not yet. My hand shot under the pillow and came out with a flashing arc of steel that slashed across his face as he rolled off of me and began to howl. I didn't wait for him to recover. I ran through the house, grabbing my purse and getting to my car, and when I turned off the road, I didn't see signs of a patrol car following. I drove throughout the night, not stopping until I was at a hotel the next state over. A half dozen times I almost stopped in some town along the way, asked for help from the police there, or tried to find some authority I could trust. But when the world is insane, it's hard to know where to look for sanity. I didn't understand what was happening, and my mind wouldn't settle enough to try and figure it out until I was somewhere safe and got some rest. So I kept driving until I was falling asleep at the wheel, and then I found a room and a bed, where I slept until the middle of the next night. It was my phone's buzz that woke me up. I'd bought a charger at a gas station before reaching the hotel, and in all the time since leaving my house, I hadn't had a call or a message from anyone. Even now, it was an automated notification causing my phone to blink. Your backyard camera has seen something. I wanted to throw the phone across the room, but I forced down the urge. I needed to get any information that might help me decide what to do next. So I tapped the notification and watched as the screen filled with the green fairy fire of the camera's night vision. And saw me. The woman looked 15 or 20 years older, with gaunt cheeks and haunted, half-crazy eyes that rolled wildly as she tried to look at the camera and everywhere around her all at once, but yeah, it was me. Old and terrified and mouthing two words over and over again. No escape, no escape, no escape. I ran again that night. Lived off credit cards as I traveled across the country and then found a small town with small jobs that paid cash. I changed my name, and I never contacted anyone from my old life. It was like a religious conversion, seeing that future version of myself had changed all my priorities and plans. Now I only wanted to prove that version of myself wrong. To escape and survive. But then he found me. He always finds me and hurts me. He hunts me and hurts me and hides me away in a place nobody can find. When it first started, he would tell me how no one could ever help me because he had made a special little pocket to keep me in. That he'd learned how to do it when he was little, and now he was strong enough to do it all the time. He's older now than when we first met him. He was when he found me, even though it had only been a few months since we cut his face open, it had been scarred over for years when I saw him next. He told me that he had to wait until he knew enough to not only keep the pocket open, but to break time. He says that time is a lie, and like many things, I've seen enough to believe him now. The first time I saw him disappear in front of me, I thought it was a trick. It took a while before I realized it was a crack I could crawl through if I was fast and brave enough. I've escaped him over 30 times, and I'm still not as old and crazy as that version of us in the last video. I used to think that he was letting me escape just to toy with me, but I don't think that's it anymore. Whatever he is or can do, he's not a god. He's flawed and well, I think he just has trouble keeping track of all of us. I've followed in his wake as he's traveled to other times, but also to other pockets he's made. I've found other versions of us, other timelines where different choices created different paths, at least until he came to visit. He's collecting us, I think. I don't know how he finds us, but he can, every damn time. I've asked him why he wants us so much. It turns out you can only endure so much pain and cruelty and fear before you become brave. He just laughed at first, but then he stopped and seemed to consider the question seriously. He told me that he had never understood why he had his gift or what he was meant to do with it. That for all that he'd seen, he'd only been left with more questions than answers. It had made him feel empty and angry, and when he was a younger man he'd taken that out on people he ran across when he thought he'd not get caught. And then he met this woman. He was just doing a follow-up to a complaint about people in her backyard. He knew right away he wanted to visit her that night, so that's just what he did. And then she slashed him across the face and ran off into the night. That was the first time in years he'd felt afraid at all, and he'd never been scared like that before. It was that terror and uncertainty that triggered it, he thinks. He instinctively reached out to create a pocket to crawl into and hide from anyone that might come when she got help, but instead he tumbled into the past. It took months for him to learn to do it again, and years more before he could really control it. By then he knew he was the next thing to God. And the first thing he said about doing was finding us. Not just because we hurt him, though that was part of it. And not just because we triggered his untapped potential, though that played a part too. He said the main reason was because we weren't done helping him. That if he could collect enough of us, he would be able to understand and really see God's face before he killed it. That's not the point. The point is that he will never stop coming for you. For any of you. I'm not even from your timeline, I don't think, so I'm technically not the future version of you. But the story for all of us is the same. We warn our past selves, it doesn't work, and then he adds another to his collection. Some of us escape and... oh God. I wonder if that's what he's doing. If he's letting us escape, put out our warnings to our past or other selves, and then harvesting all the new different timelines that grow up from those intervening messages. Different choices and paths leading to new crops of victims. I don't know. And I don't know if it matters. All I know is that you need to run and be smarter than I was. Keep a small gun and a knife on you at all times. All times. The gun is for him. He's tough, but he's still human, and as he gets older he's getting slower too. If that doesn't work, well, the knife is for yourself. You think that's insane. I know because I think the same thing. But this is why I told you all of this. So you would know I'm you, a version of you, and that you can trust me. You can believe me when I tell you that I've seen the fields where he grows and buries us, hundreds of holes burrowed into the flesh of the universe. The things in there, well, a blade across the throat would be a mercy if it comes to that. So I'll end it here. Good luck. Stay safe. And I hope I never see you again.